And next up is going to be Tallrock, a fantasy LitRPG adventure farming Livia, book number 1 by Xander Boyce. It is $379. Sorry, 379 pages. That would be a big price tag. $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. An untapped frontier, reaping and sowing, redemption through growth. Matt is running from a life that he no longer wants, and he's found a solution. By logging into the newest game, Livia, he gains chances that he can't get anywhere else. Matt chooses to cut out a new life for himself at the edge of civilization by venturing to the frontier town of Tallrock. As soon as he gains his class, this newly minted Cycle Mage has one goal: farming. Now known in-game as Kastigan, he gains a starting bonus parcel of virgin land that he will need to convert to farmland from the ground up. Kastigan needs to decide what to grow, what animals to raise, and who to hire, all while dealing with a legion commander who hates him for no apparent reason, surviving in the wildland where monsters roam freely, and uncovering lost relics from a forgotten time. If he succeeds, he will create a new home for himself. If he fails, he will lose not only his farm, but all the workers, crops, and beasts that he has spent every last penny to acquire. So there we go. Yeah, it's a pretty decent novel description. And yeah, okay. This is a virtual reality MMO story where the main character is looking to make a living selling and auctioning items. He chooses to try the rare farming route instead of traditional adventuring. And along the way, he meets a lizard woman who is a beast tamer, and together they explore, farm, breed, stock, and adventure. And that's kind of it. The first 15% of the story is kind of a big input up. Personally, I had to push myself through some of the unneeded details. Like, I felt like not the information itself was unneeded, but that they could have been spread out throughout the story when they were actually going to come up. It's a personal opinion, but it made the front a little thick in details to kind of like really grasp and enjoy. But by the 20% mark, the story gets on track and for adventure, exploration, farming, and you know, like I said, the novel description is pretty honest. They're like, oh, this is a farming story. And it absolutely is. That's the focus of the story. I don't want to say it's a negative, but it's definitely a story choice that I noticed impacted my enjoyment of the story, is that there's not really a lot of action. There are essentially like a couple scenes, like smaller scenes that maybe make up, 10-15% of the story. As far as all the action goes, and there aren't any antagonists. There are very few challenges even for the main character in the story. And for me, while I enjoyed it overall, I wish there would have been more conflict, whether it was against nature or somebody who was trying to steal land from the main character, or somebody, at least, some kind of conflict where the main character, for me at least, felt like he had to struggle and think, and he failed, and he came back from it, something like that. And that just doesn't really exist in a major way. Like, there's small setbacks that he goes through, and I think one of the bigger challenges for him is just, how am I going to get my crops to the town that's so far away? And that was like a major thing for him towards the end of the story. And I was like, oh, okay. So if you're looking for like a huge action-filled kind of story, this isn't it, at least in book 1. Instead, this is really just about farming and exploring game mechanics, and like this really nice natural exploration of what farming within an RPG system would kind of look like. And there's a lot of setup in the game mechanics for some really cool things to happen. They're just not really explored in book 1 at this point. The game mechanics themselves are detailed. Xander Boyce is known for his good grasp on these and ensuring game mechanics and making them feel like they're a natural part of the world, and that's absolutely the case here. There's elemental affinity systems which determine like how spells and how powerful they are. The beast binding process I thought was kind of neat as a companion to the farming as animal husbandry. I'm a little up in the air about the mini game system. It feels a little, I'm never a fan of mini games and RPGs in the first place, but I understand that they exist, and they add a level of random skillishness to the story as far as like getting a skill bonus for finding a thing. So and it's consistent, which is to me more important than me personally liking mini games or not, is the fact that the author is consistent in all the game mechanics, including that particular one. There's a bit of crafting, but again, most of the story it really is just farming. It's the main character figuring out how to buy his land, how to get the most of it, getting trading his tokens for the actual land after he scouts it out, taming animals, using his magic to cultivate the land without actually having to manually cultivate it, hiring workers, all that stuff exists, and there's all these game mechanics for it, which flow naturally and make sense. Most of the notifications is pretty standard level: skills, abilities, health, mana, etc. The things that are different are, of course, going to be related to the elemental affinity stuff, which includes his ability to essentially be, I want to say a druidish class or a Jewish main. Conceptually, it feels more like farming RPG. His farming RPG powers with some potentially really cool offensive abilities that just aren't really used in fights in this particular book. So there. Overall, again, it's I want to say it's an okay story, and that's mostly because I like action, and I don't think the man versus nature is mutually exclusive to man versus man kind of story concepts. And I feel like this story was definitely trying to go with man versus nature as a conflict, and it just didn't really pan out, for me at least, because the main character didn't really feel like he had challenges. He didn't feel like there was ever any chance of him ultimately losing or not actually succeeding, especially with a bunch of the front-loaded bonuses that he kind of gets his hands on in some directions. So for me, that left a lack of tension in the story. And that kind of makes for a very casual read. And personally, I like slice of life stories. And so this was still an entertaining story for me. But I can absolutely see some people who don't like slice of life stories, who don't like a casual read without, tension, saying oh, this is not for them. And that's totally valid. Every story is not for everybody. For me, I think the things that it does well is absolutely in the text, it's in the novelization, the farming. Those game mechanics are really solid, and they're interesting, and they have, again, really nice potential features for the future. For me, I like the slice of life aspect. I liked what little conflict existed, or little fights, I should say. And the farming aspect, I like just seeing the main character think and plan, and things work out for them, which potentially future conflicts set up where I could see, even though they were, I was frustrated that they weren't fulfilled here. I could see in the future, this is going to be an issue and this is going to be an issue. And okay, I can see these being issues in the future, but they're just not here. And so the main character succeeds for the most part. I was okay, that's cool. So for me, it gets a score 7.1 out of 10. That's not a bad score. It's still, I enjoyed it score. It's just, I didn't enjoy it as much as I was hoping. I definitely like the author's other series, his RPG Apocalypse series, quite a bit more. But they're different concepts, and every writer has the right to write whatever they're interested in. And I liked a good portion of the story. I just had issues with other things, and that didn't mean I didn't like it. It's just I didn't enjoy it as much as I was hoping I was going to, I guess. But I still think a lot of people will enjoy this, and a lot of people have enjoyed it tremendously. He has lots of nice reviews and lots of positive responses to this. So if you think you are okay with that kind of setup for the story, I definitely recommend it as a read. But again, with those caveats that I've already mentioned. That's Tallrock, a fantasy LitRPG adventure, Farming Livia, book number 1 with a score of 7.1 out of 10.